I think the number one thing is obviously the product. You build a product that people really want to use, and you can get away with being mediocre in sales and marketing and other stuff. Our CEO likes to say that we build a product so good that a mediocre sales and marketing team could push it to market, and we built a sales and marketing team so great that they could push a mediocre product. And once you have both, the sky's the limit, and that's kind of what we built.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Growth Hub podcast, the podcast for all things B2B SaaS marketing, brought to you by marketing agency Advanced B2B. I'm your host, Clément René, and today I am stoked to welcome a very special guest on the show, Udi Ledergor, Chief Evangelist Officer at Gong. Udi joined Gong in 2016 as employee number 13 and was the first of what is now a team of 60 talented marketers. Along the way, he contributed to taking Gong from a couple $100,000 in revenue into a business making hundreds of millions of dollars in annual revenue. And so, you can imagine that Udi has a couple of priceless pieces of advice to share. Advice you can then implement to grow your own business. In this episode, we cover Udi's journey from CMO to Chief Evangelist Officer, what was the most instrumental in growing Gong into a supersonic business, Udi's 5 steps to better align sales and marketing, his human-first marketing approach, his views on AI, how to leverage influencer marketing to support growth, as well as very concrete and inspiring examples to take home. So let's go for episode 110 of the Growth Hub podcast with Udi Ledergor, former CMO and now Chief Evangelist Officer at Gong. Hello Udi and welcome to the show.
Hi Clem, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So can you briefly introduce yourself and tell us about the journey that led you to become Chief Evangelist Officer at Gong?
Yeah, so my name is Udi Ledergor. I was born and raised in Tel Aviv, Israel. And that's where I started working at Gong. Gong was the 5th company I led marketing at. And I started there about 9 years ago in 2016. I was fortunate to get a call from my CEO, Amit Ben-Dov, who over the last 25 years has called me a couple of times. So I've been working with him on and off for the last 25 years at 3 different companies. And when he called me and said, Udi, you remember the crazy idea I told you about over coffee 6 months ago? I said, yes, something about recording customer conversations to understand what's happening in sales. He said, yes. So we built the product, we rolled it out to 12 beta customers, and within 3 months, 11 of them became paying customers. So I think we're ready to start marketing this. We have 12 engineers. You would be employee number 13. Do you want to come join? I said, yes, I would like to come join. And that's kind of how it all started. And then over the next 6.5 years, I led Gong's marketing from a team of 1 to a team of 60. And then 2 years ago, it was clear that we're moving into a new stage in our growth, going from hundreds of millions in revenue to billions, hopefully soon. Not hopefully, because hope is a terrible strategy, but we're doing what it takes to get there. And then we decided to bring in leaders who have been at large companies like Microsoft and Google to come in and take us to that next stage of growth based on their experience. So in the last year or so, we've gotten a new Chief Revenue Officer, a new Chief People Officer, a new Chief Marketing Officer, and a new Chief Customer Officer. So all those people have stepped in and are doing a great job at taking us with more confidence and experience into that next level of growth.
All right, but I have to ask, what made you shift from that marketing officer position to Chief Evangelist Officer position?
Well, there's things like everyone that I do better and get more excited about than other things. And when it was clear that we need someone with experience in that next stage of growth to run the big marketing ship, I decided to stay and create my own new role, which I've done every time. So I've probably created my last 5 or 6 or 7 roles kind of from thin air. And I was looking at how I can continue to make an impact and help Gong. And I figured that by doing things like we're doing here today, podcasts and speaking opportunities. So I do about 75 or 80 of these a year at conferences and webinars and podcasts, continue to spread the good word of Gong so more people know about it. I do hundreds of executive meetings and dinners, meeting with executives and showing them how to use Gong as an executive for all the insights that they need. And I do other thought leadership projects, influencer marketing, and other things that I'm still making an impact at Gong in my new role as Chief Evangelist.
All right. Well, you mentioned you mentioned Gong's growth already a little bit, but even though all businesses and growth journeys are rather unique, there's always something to learn from, let's say, like success stories like Gong's. So looking back on your time at Gong, so far from employee 13 to now Chief Evangelist Officer, what do you think was the most instrumental in turning the company from a couple $100,000 in annual revenue into a hundreds of millions of dollars in annual revenue?
I think the number one thing is obviously the product. You build a product that people really want to use, and you can get away with being mediocre in sales and marketing and other stuff. Our CEO likes to say that we build a product so good that a mediocre sales and marketing team could push it to market, and we built a sales and marketing team so great that they could push a mediocre product. And once you have both, the sky's the limit, and that's kind of what we built. So it really starts with the product, because you can get away with selling some people a product that's not great once, but they're not going to renew, and then you can't build a subscription business on it. But if you have a great product that people actually love, it makes everything infinitely easier, because sales have a lot of raving fans that they could tap into as references. Marketing have amazing fans that we can use for case studies and getting them on stage and on our website. And of course, the numbers take care of themselves, because now they love the product, they want to renew, so we can focus on bringing in new, bigger business, and we don't have to chase after every renewal because they're threatening to leave us. So those are kind of the main components. Number one is obviously product. I can't take any credit for that. Our product team and engineering team built an amazing product. And then I want to think that that marketing and sales gave it a great push, and we knew how to create a brand early on with content and event experiences and some solid demand gen, and that helped us grow even faster with our great product.
Well, you just talked about marketing and sales at the moment, and I'm assuming that you guys figured alignment out a little bit, probably. Do you have any tips when it comes to that? Because silos and misalignment is always something that is disturbing, let's say, a lot of B2B companies' growth. So how did you guys figure it out?
Absolutely. And I think you touched on a really, really important topic. So sales and marketing, when they align well, magic can happen. If they don't align well, like nothing is going to work. I've not seen a single company where sales and marketing were not aligned that they did really, really well. And we figured this out at Gong, and we had 5 guiding principles to align sales and marketing. And that's beyond creating a really strong human relationship, which I think is really the start and the finish of all of this. So my CRO, Ryan Longfield, and I used to go every week on a walk to get coffee and get a cookie. And we used to talk about our families and our teams. And then we got down to business, and just having that relationship and showing up together to meetings when we had already aligned on our challenges and what we're doing to solve them. It saved us from that all too common dynamics of sales and marketing pointing fingers at each other. Typically, sales says, marketing brings crap leads and not enough of them. And marketing complains about sales not following up and not selling to those leads. Well, we had very, very little of that at Gong, because Ryan and I were always aligned, and we came into meetings explaining where we are and if marketing was doing well and SDR or sales needed some help. So we supported that. And sometimes marketing did not deliver the numbers, and so sales and SDR had to do a little bit more. And that made us focus on how are we strategizing on moving forward, rather than pointing fingers at each other and blaming each other for what's not working. So that's kind of the high level. But then if you want me to run through the kind of 5 quick principles that we put together, number one is having shared KPIs and targets. So I've seen this in many companies where marketing sets a target that sales doesn't even understand. A common example is an MQL. Nobody in sales cares what an MQL is. It's a completely made up thing that only marketing cares about. And it's great as a leading indicator for marketers to use internally. But as my longtime VP of sales, Jameson Young, used to say, "Oh, you brought us MQLs. That's adorable." Like, what are they supposed to do with them? These are not people who ask to speak to a salespeople. Most companies' MQLs are someone who either attended an event or downloaded a white paper. They're not ready for a sales conversation. What are sales supposed to do with them? So we aligned on KPIs. In our case, it was sales qualified opportunities. This is someone who from any of the channels, inbound or outbound, partnerships or SDR, AE self-sourced or marketing website, they came in and they asked to speak to a salesperson. And then after they spoke to the salesperson, which by the way, many people ask, but then don't show up to the meeting. So they asked, we set up a time, they showed up to the meeting, and then the salesperson confirmed that they're a qualified buyer. Now this becomes a sales qualified opportunity, and only then marketing gets a point, or SDR or sales or whoever was prospecting. And once you create these common KPIs, that's just one of them, but probably the most important one, and you all agreed on the lead qualification criteria, now you're talking the same language, and that is a basis for any good communications. The second one is all the other key definitions. So it's not just common KPIs, but understanding what constitutes a qualified lead in terms of geography, in terms of industry, in terms of business function, in terms of seniority. In some companies, there's also a matter of timing or budget or need or whatever it is in there. It has to be a controlled document that marketing and sales agree on, and they revisit it at least once a quarter to see if anything needs to change. The third thing that kind of is derived from there is sharing unified dashboards and reports. I've been at so many meetings at other companies where sales and marketing and ops and finance come in and each has their own report and they've got different numbers on them. And now half the time, if not all of it, is spent on arguing, no, but I'm measuring it this way and that's not what a qualified lead means. And then everyone has their set of numbers. So no, you've got to get your mechanics and tooling in place early, have one set of dashboards and reports so you're not arguing about the data, but about what it means and what we're going to do about it. So that's number 3, it's reports and dashboards. Number 4 is just having regular meetings across teams. And this is not just at the top leadership level. Every director and manager on my team met regularly with their peers in sales. So for example, if we have a wonderful ABM programs team, every ABM program manager sits in the weekly sales meeting of the regional VP that she's supporting, so that she gets to know the people, obviously by name, but not just the people, but which accounts each of them is working on, which contacts they're trying to contact within each account, so she can help them build a plan for that account. And it's that level of alignment that shows sales that marketing is there for them. It shows that commitment and it creates these relationships, which makes things so easy. One story that demonstrates that is at some point at Gong, we lost a SDR leader for one of the teams. And we knew it would take us about a quarter, if not more, to hire a new one, but we couldn't afford to skip a beat. And we came up with the idea that even though the SDR team was reporting to sales at the time, my demand generation director, Russell Banzon, he had great management skills and he was very close to SDR. And we had the crazy idea, what if we take this marketing leader and let him lead the SDR team for a quarter or two until we hire a leader there, so he can continue doing his job in marketing and take on this other full-time role, but that way we won't skip a beat. And he agreed to do that, and he did it really, really well. And he created a great relationship between marketing and the SDR team that lasted for years after that, because he had stepped in and done what it would take to help them. Not every company they would do that or even think of asking someone from marketing to step into a sales role, sales leadership role, no less, to do that. So that's number 4. And then last one, number 5, is investing in internal marketing. And what I mean by internal marketing is making sure that every person in sales and also outside of sales, but for this purpose in sales, understand how marketing is making sales easier. And so I did this at every onboarding session with salespeople. I explain how marketing works, not just the fun stuff that we're doing, but how we actually convert, how that black box works, and how our content and events turn into qualified meetings that salespeople get, and that becomes their opportunities. And so when we want to ask, for example, salespeople to help us share our content or invite attendees to events, they understand exactly how doing that is helping us help them back, because it's going to make sales easier when we convert those people and those event attendees into sales qualified opportunities. So these are, I know it took a little bit longer than you might expected, but these are the 5 things that I could keep talking about that make sales and marketing align so well at Gong.
Oh, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing, Udi. But now I have to ask also, like, we talked about what, worked for you guys, but similarly, is there something that you learned not to do along the way?
There's lots and lots of things I learned not to do. Like anyone who's done anything, I've probably failed at way more things than I've actually succeeded. I think looking back, as I was wrapping up my term as CMO, I realized one strategic mistake that I made was too often looking inwards at my team, and I love every team member, and I love mentoring them and coaching them and promoting them and seeing them succeed. And several of my past team members are now CMOs at other companies, which gives me lots of pride. But focusing on my team sometimes came at the expense of focusing on my other team, the executive team. It's often called team number 1 and team number 2. And I focused on team number 2 99% of the time. And I probably should have focused more on team number 1, the executive team, because in hindsight, again, I didn't always see this in real time. I favored working well with my team and giving them what they needed and promoting them and keeping them over hitting some of the targets that I owed my fellow executives. And I probably could have made some hiring and firing and promotion decisions differently to strike a better balance between keeping that great relationship that I had with my team throughout most of the years, but also delivering what management needed more from me.
All right. Well, that's a very critical look at what you've accomplished, because I mean, you're doing very well. So yeah,
okay.
I appreciate you sharing this. But I mean, we've covered a little bit of the bigger picture at Gong, but I also wanted to dive into some specifics and some key learnings that you could also maybe share with our audience. So for context, I know that you are quite vocal on LinkedIn, for instance, about like human first marketing. And one of the first things actually that pops on Google when looking for, Udi Ledergor is a quote from you from the GTM Now podcast. And you said, if you're not nervous about how many people you're not going to piss off, it's probably going to be meh. And I really love that. And I know you have identified 3 things that successful pieces of content all have. So could you maybe elaborate on this for our audience who maybe have not watched this specific podcast?
I think the bigger picture is that if you look at any company that does great marketing, it pretty much always comes with a very strong point of view that's somewhat disagreeable, potentially polarizing or controversial. If everything you're doing in marketing is agreeable and everyone agrees with you, nobody's getting excited about it either. The worst response to marketing is not getting haters. That's a good thing, to a point. The worst response to marketing is indifference, is when people ignore you, when what you're saying is so trivial and agreeable that there's nothing left to say. There's no conversation or debate to have about it. And that's what I meant by putting out content and talks and events that gave people something to argue about. They were not to everyone's taste. I'll give you a demonstrative example, illustrative example. So a few years ago, we put out a research piece that suggested that when salespeople use swear words on their sales calls, it can increase their win rates by up to 8%. And I can explain in more detail, but that's not the point right now. And when we put that research out, it created a whole shitstorm, pardon my French, on the internet, because a lot of people loved the finding and it confirmed what they were already doing, but maybe were a little embarrassed and people told them not to speak that way. And so they were using all their colorful vocabulary to say, yeah, that's what I've been talking about and that's the good stuff and so on. And then another smaller group of people was appalled that we would suggest using this kind of language in a professional setting. So that created a beautiful argument and debate, and it was mostly comical with people using all their colorful vocabulary, but some of them really took offense. And I'm okay with that because that created a beautiful discussion. That meant that news sites like fastcompany.com ran with the story, giving us earned media that I could never afford to buy. It means that radio station called me in and wanted me to talk about this on air because it was such groundbreaking research that their audience wanted to hear about. Again, earning us earned media. And that is every marketer's dream, creating such a controversy that people want to talk about it and end up positioning Gong as the authority on what works and doesn't work in sales and why. And so that's what I mean. Even when we send, here's another example for you. We send out the most boring email of the year. We've updated our privacy policy, right? If your inbox is anything like mine, it's full of these emails right now. In January, everyone has to send them out. And we had to send one out a few years ago. And my team came to me and said, Udi, like, what do we do with this email? It's the most boring thing in the world. I said, well, don't make it boring. And they put their heads together and they came up with a beautiful, brilliant email. It had a Britney Spears meme in it, and it had a very scary subject line. The subject line was, our lawyers made us send this. And it got a 39% open rate on a privacy policy email because it scared the shit out of people when they received it. And then they opened it up and they saw the Britney Spears mail, and it was very funny inside. And then there was a link to the actual privacy policy if anybody really wanted to read it. But we took an email that was potentially the most boring email a team ever has to send, and we made it fun. And we made it so fun that people took screenshots and posted it on Twitter and on LinkedIn and wrote blogs about it on Medium. And like, this is how you take a boring email and you make it fun. So again, we seized an opportunity of doing something that most companies would never think about twice. Just use the lawyer's words and send it out and let's hope we can move on. I'm like, no, this is an opportunity to connect and engage and entertain our audience. Why would we miss it? If we're forced to send out an email, why would we send a boring one? Everyone's going to send out an email, but 99% are going to send out a boring one. I don't want to be the boring one.
Well, this is, I love the approach, but speaking of creativity, I'll now shift the conversation towards AI, which can be problematic thinking about creativity. But you recently wrote in a Forbes article that AI is currently being abused to create low-quality content that nobody wants to read. And you also then said that you expect this to backfire in the coming year or years. And I'm really curious to hear how, because I'm asking because I obviously agree with you. I think we're all sick of like poor quality content. There was already poor quality content before AI, but now with AI that it's so easy to produce content, it's getting a little bit out of hands. And yeah, we're seeing all of those clearly AI generated posts on LinkedIn, or those emails that ask you to elevate your marketing. This is my most favorite one. So yeah, I'm just very curious to hear how you think that this is going to backfire in the near future.
So first, if I can backtrack a little, let me make sure I position myself not as an AI hater, because I'm not. I work for an AI company. We create AI for sales and marketing and other teams on the revenue side. And AI is an amazing tool when used correctly. However, what I'm seeing now is like with any technology, there are people who are abusing it. And it reminds me of 10 or 15 years ago when people discovered they could offshore stuff to third world countries or developing countries where labor was much cheaper, and still is. And there's great uses for that, right? But there's also terrible uses for that. And I remember hearing from fellow marketers where they were so proud that they could offshore their blog writing and for $50 get a blog post of 500 words. I'm like, yeah, but who's going to read that? You just send it to someone who speaks decent English, knows nothing about your market or your product or your customers or your competitors. Like, what are you going to do with that content? And to be clear, there's still legitimate uses of that. If you're just creating a long form piece for SEO and it doesn't have to be very opinionated and you just want it to be a gateway to capture some leads, okay. And I think AI is a good use case for doing that as well. There are other fantastic use cases for AI. If you want to draft something or find the exact word or sentence, or if you have a long form piece and now you need to create a 100-word version of it, a 300-word version, and a 1,000-word version of it, that's a perfect use case for AI. It can probably do it better and definitely do it much faster than any human being can do. But here's what it can't do right now. It cannot decide for you what your strong point of view is that you're going to go to market with. If you have an unpopular opinion and you want to clearly state it, and that opinion doesn't exist widespread out there, AI is not going to be able to write that for you quite yet, because AI is just taking pre-written things that it was trained on and finding the next best word or sentence to say about it. And so whatever you ask AI to do is mostly going to look like the average of what is already out there. And as we just answered in the previous topic, the best marketing has a new, novel, counterintuitive point of view that AI just can't supply for you right now. So if you, the human marketer, can't decide what that point of view is, AI is not going to save you. Once you decide what that point of view is and you give it some talking points and you ask, okay, now expand each of these into a paragraph, or let's make a different post about each of these, that's legitimate. But that's where I think people are misusing AI by asking to do more than it's supposed to do right now. And then you end up with these posts, which looks like the one that my friend outsourced 10 years ago. Nobody wants to read them because they look like everything you've already read, because they are based on everything you've already read.
All right, so I want to take you on another topic now. I want to talk about email marketing. So I'm asking for a friend here, and definitely not as someone who's trying to grow their own email subscriber list, but how does one get to a 500,000 email subscriber list?
I'm going to disappoint with a very simple answer, and it's like send people what they want to read. That's really all there is to it. So, there's great tips out there, like what time of day to send and what days to send and how long it should be and how often you should send. They're okay to look at and learn from. At the end of the day, if you have a fantastic email, you can send it out on a Sunday morning and it'll get great responses. I've done that on social media. I've done it in emails. And if you send out a terrible email at the perfect time to the perfect person at the right length, it's not going to perform. So it's all about the content. And we've learned that even frequency doesn't really matter. You can send people, some emails people get every single day. There was a time where websites like Groupon were very popular and they were sending out daily deals. I'm sure there's still websites that do this. Mm-hmm. People who are interested in them don't mind getting a daily email from you if it's something useful that they want to consume. So don't worry about sending too many emails and burning out your list if you're sending out stuff that you would want to consume if you were them. And another even higher bar for content quality is, would they want to pay to subscribe to that content? And when I say that, a lot of B2B marketers kind of laugh or scoff. They say, like, who's going to pay for content? Well, do you pay for YouTube Premium or Spotify or Netflix or Masterclass or New York Times or any of those websites? Well, you're paying for content because it's good enough that you feel worth investing in. Why don't you create content so good that people are willing to pay for it? And over my time at Gong, several times, we got questions from university professors and sales enablement leaders who were reading our content, and they asked what it would cost them to license our content for their classes in university or for their internal team trainings. And every time we got one of those emails, we passed it around the team and celebrated because we knew that we had reached our bar of creating content so good that people are willing to pay for it. It doesn't happen on every email, it doesn't happen every week. But if it never happens, and if people are unsubscribing faster than you're adding new people to the list, then something is wrong. You're either not targeting the right people or not giving them what they want to read. And so the number one tip is to simply create things that people want to read. And that requires work. And that means that quality is always going to be more important than quantity. If you don't have strong content to send out and you can't fill your daily or weekly slot, don't. It's much better not to send something out. Or if you have to rehash something that you know worked well and you haven't sent out in at least 6 months or maybe a year, and it's still relevant, send that out again. It might perform well because most people didn't open it last time anyway, and those who did don't remember that they did. But don't send out mediocre content just because your calendar says you have to send something out. That's how you burn through your list and people don't want to subscribe. And make it easy for people to forward it. So some of the best emails I receive have a note that says, if you were forwarded this from a friend, here's where you can sign up for our newsletter. And when you send great content, imagine you're sending to salespeople content like we did on how swearing on sales calls is going to help you win more deals. Every salesperson who got that probably sent it to a couple of others, and then they had a link to sign up to receive this themselves. So we saw a lot of signups when that happens. And we made sure that if we have content that's, say, only for sales enablement leaders, then we segment our list and we only send that to sales enablement. And if it's for RevOps, it's for RevOps. And if it's for senior sales leaders, we won't send it to the AEs. And if it's for AEs, we won't send it to the senior sales leaders. We have different versions, and not all emails go out to everyone. So if you treat your list with respect and you send them what you think is truly going to give them value, to the point of some of them might even want to pay for it, then you're going to do well. They're going to forward it to others. Others are going to sign up, and they're going to stick with you.
All right, well, that's fantastic advice. I will try to stick to it. Maybe up my game a little bit. And now, before we part ways, I have one more question for you, and it's about influencer marketing. Because again, I know that you guys have been leveraging this quite a lot at Gong. So I know that for you guys listening to us, everyone is probably very aware that influencer marketing is very straightforward, or like when thinking about influencer marketing, most people would think about B2C setting, with brands working on Instagram with influencers to introduce creams, drinks, or whatnot. All that to boost their awareness, their sales. But given how complex B2B sales can be, how would you recommend relying on influencer marketing in a way that doesn't feel out of place? And how have you guys done it at Gong to accelerate your growth?
Yeah, influencer marketing can absolutely work in B2B. And I think it works best when there's an authentic relationship between the brand and the influencer. And I can give some examples. And it reads and rings authentic to your customers. So here's an example. 18 months ago, Gong launched a product called Gong Engage. And it's a sales engagement system powered by AI. And it's much better and more advanced than the legacy systems out there in the market. And as part of the launch strategy, I built an influencer program. I recruited about 24 sales influencers. These are practitioners like SDR leaders and sales leaders working at companies like Snowflakes and others. Some of them have training firms and sales consultants with a history of being operators. And all these people are well respected with lots of followers in the sales space. And I came to them and I said, look, I've got an idea. We're about to release this product in a couple of months. And part of the product is going to be a library of templates from the best sales leaders in the world, their best converting sales templates for outbound emails, for cold calling, for follow-ups. And I think you have a ton of experience. And if you would give me 3 of your best converting templates, I will make them visible to hundreds of thousands of Gong users. I will give you a little commercial banner within Gong when they access the template library. For example, Lars Nielsen was the head of SDR at Snowflake at the time. And so I gave Lars a spot in the product with his photo and links to his LinkedIn profile and website. And here's where you can find out more. And some of them have paid courses and other materials. So it was almost like a landing page for them within Gong's product. Imagine that, exposing them to the hundreds of users of Gong. And all I ask for them is give me 3 of your templates and I'll put this credit in there. And then when we launch the product, I'll ask you to put out a post on LinkedIn and being proud of being included with your templates. And they all said yes. I reached out to 24. I think 22 said yes. One of them did not work for some technical reasons. And one of them did not want to do it because I was not paying them anything. But she didn't see the value of being included in our product, or she wanted to focus on paid engagements, which is fine. And so with my 0 budget, I recruited 22 influencers, very well known with lots of reach in my industry. They gave me free content, their templates to put in my product. I gave them free exposure in my product, and they all helped us launch the product on social media in a really big way that made other industry players, like, their ears perked up and their eyes open. Like, how do they do that? Like, why are all these sales leaders now cooperating with Gong on this? Well, because I offered them a win-win deal where no money had to exchange hands, but I gave them something they wanted. I got something that I wanted. And it all made sense to our users because all of these were respected sales leaders in their field. Their content is known to work. They have the experience, so they know what converts in email templates. And so our audience received that with a lot of enthusiasm. And now they have this celebrity template library with all these email templates that they can use from celebrities. So that I think is a pretty good example of how to do influencer marketing right.
Yeah, I love how natural that felt, and probably that's why it worked so well, because it was a win-win situation. And
and we kept our relationship with them. So for the year that followed the product launch, every couple of months we did a webinar with one of those influencers who loved the publicity. So I brought them as a free speaker on a Gong webinar, exposing them to hundreds, if not thousands, of Gong users. And they were talking about their expertise, again, establishing their leadership in a way that associated with Gong also enhanced our leadership and provided a lot of value to customers. So it was not, I'm not going to ask Kim Kardashian to support Gong Engage because that does not feel authentic.
Yeah.
But asking someone like a Lars Nielsen or a Dave Delaney or someone in our field to do that, it feels very natural and authentic in a way that makes sense.
All right. Well, thank you again for this. But I did lie before. I actually have one more question. And this one is, what's a piece of advice you received in your career that helped you become better at your job?
One piece of advice I received early on in my career is when planning anything, it can be a webinar or an event or advertising campaign is to stop and think, what's the big idea? What is going to drive action when we do this? Because most of us have a natural tendency of jumping into the tactics and, oh, I need to set up a booth and I need giveaways and I need staff. But wait, what's the big idea? Like, how's all this going to tie together? Why are people going to be lining up at our booth to come talk with us? And you need a big idea, and then everything else is derived from that. And when you start with strategy and then follow with the tactics, and you do that at the highest level of what is my marketing strategy for this year or for the next 2 years, and then what's the strategy for the quarter, and what's the strategy for this email, and what's the strategy for this webinar, then the tactics become easy and straightforward, and they actually work, and you get fewer surprises. So asking yourself, what's the big idea before you start planning all the details? And until you find one, don't start planning the details, because they're probably not going to work well unless you know what the big idea is.
So working on the why before the what, essentially.
Exactly.
Well, Udi, thank you so much for joining today. And I wanted to ask, do you have anything going on that you want to share with our audience?
Yes. First, I would love to connect with anyone on LinkedIn. There's only one Udi Ledergor there, so I make it very easy for you to connect. And second, if you want to learn all of my lessons from Gong and 20 years of B2B marketing leadership, my book, Courageous Marketing, is now out and available on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles and wherever you buy your books. So go look up Courageous Marketing by Udi Ledergor, and I'd love to hear what you think about it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Udi.
Thank you.
And this concludes today's episode. I hope you learned a thing or two, and if you did, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. This podcast is brought to you by marketing agency Advanced B2B. So if you're looking for a partner to assist you with strategic marketing and anything HubSpot, visit advancedb2b.com. And if you're still around to hear this, thank you for listening and take care.